Welcome to the weekly analysis video on Maven Charts. Hope you all enjoying your weekend. Starting with SPY. SPY today printed a small bearish candle right at this resistance, collecting liquidity above yesterday's high and at the resistance of this trend line, leaving a fair value gap. So this fair value gap may act as a support in the coming sessions. If it close below this fair value gap, then price may come and test this support level or even this inverse fair value gap area, this level. Around 665.5, which is the 50% of this gap formed during the ceasefire news, that will align to this inverse fair value gap also. If it takes support of this fair value gap and breaks out of this resistance, then we may advance to test this or even this resistance at 691.39, followed by the all-time high. Let's see how price is reacting to these support levels in the coming session. Now looking at the hourly time frame. On the hourly time frame, even though price opened little gap above, it just printed back-to-back doji candles, collecting liquidity above this yesterday's high, then printed a bearish engulfing candle on the third hour of the session today, followed by another small bearish candle taking support at this level where it took support yesterday, leaving a fair value gap between those two hourly candle. Then for the rest 3 hours of the session, price couldn't close above this fair value gap. So breaking below 678.50, we have supported 676.3, followed by 672.9, and this gap. Moving on to 15 minutes time frame for the intraday price action. Today was the usual Friday price action. Price opened little gap up and was just consolidating above yesterday's high with small candles. Then after printing this inverted hammer, it just printed back-to-back bearish candles, closing below 20 EMA on 15 minutes time frame. Even when it tried to close above the 20 EMA on 15 minutes time frame, it just got faked out and price got pushed down to test the support area. On the 15 minutes time frame, we can see this pattern got formed, the head and shoulder pattern. If we break below this support at 678.5, this may act as a resistance to push the price further down to 67, followed by this support at 64, and then followed by this support at 672 on the 15 minutes time frame. We have this fair value gap which got mitigated a couple of times already, and we have this unmitigated fair value gap right above the support level, which may act as a support in the coming sessions during the intraday time frame. Looking at the 4 hours time frame. So on the 4 hour time frame, price or rejection from this trend line resistance as well as this resistance level. The first 4 hours of the session today printed a bearish engulfing candle after yesterday's doji candle. Then the second 4 hour candle could not close above the 50% of this bearish engulfing candle. This candlestick pattern is very important because we got a strong bullish candle followed by a doji and then a bearish engulfing candle right at this resistance as well as this trend line resistance, and the RSI rejected at 70%. Also, we are coming out of this resistance for the third time. We saw a major correction when it rejected from this trend line for the second time. If the price pulls back to test these support levels, we may see this pattern, the inverse head and shoulder pattern, on the larger time frame. If any unexpected happens, then this trend line resistance may cause another lower low. Looking at the weekly time frame, on the weekly time frame, we got a follow through bullish engulfing candle closing well above 20 EMA on weekly time frame. Price is currently at this resistance level. If it pulls back, we have a support of this weekly's high and opening price of that weekly's high around 666, which will be the 50% of this weekly candle. Looking at the monthly time frame, we are just at the second week of the month, and so far we have a nice green candle. The 20 EMA also catching up. Let's see if we have another move like this we had in the last year. But we have not collected the liquidity below 20 EMA yet, like last time it did on monthly time frame. But we can clearly see that price took support from this fair value gap again on monthly time frame. This is acting as a strong support. It supported in November and this time in March and April. So on the daily time frame, price is currently at the resistance. Breaking above, we have resistance at 684.5, followed by 688 and then 691.5. We break below the support of 678.5, then we have this fair value gap followed by 676 and 672.9 followed by 667 and 665 level. Looking at Microsoft, even though SPY is near to its all-time high, Microsoft did not recover anything yet. Even on the large gap up on Wednesday, it sold off, rejecting from this resistance level. But we can see that price is taking support from this inverse fair value gap level for last 4 or 5 sessions after invalidating it on month end. We have earnings on this month end, April 29th. So price may consolidate between these levels, 381 and 356 till the earnings. If we break below this fair value gap, then we have a swing low at 356, 342.5 at the swing low, and then we have this fair value gap between 338 and 333. Resistance, we have this overhead resistance at 374 followed by 381.69 and 392.5, and then this swing high. Also, we have this short-term trend. Let's see how price is reacting to this trend line resistance in the coming days. Looking at the weekly time frame. At the weekly time frame, Microsoft is at oversold level on RSI and hovering below 200 SMA on weekly time frame. So this week it just saw a rejection from this fair value gap. If we move above, we have fair value gap at these levels between 388 and 395, which may act as a resistance. On a monthly time frame, price is sitting at the support level, and we have earnings on the last week of this month. Moving on to Nvidia. So Nvidia, as we discussed last week, it pulled back and took support below these moving averages and at this level, and went all the way up to this fair value gap again, which was already tested before. Now if we retrace back below to test 200 SMA and 20 EMA at the support level of 185, this gap, we'll watch how it reacts to those levels. We see bullish reactions from this support or from this gap, then Nvidia will go and break this descending triangle pattern and test this all-time high of 212. If we see rejection strongly from this resistance or from this resistance at 193, aligning to this trendline resistance, then we may come and test the swing low at 164 or even another lower low. Looking at the weekly time frame, like SPY, Nvidia also printed a follow through bullish engulfing candle, closing well above 20 EM and weekly time frame. So if we pull back, price may get support at 185, followed by this week's open at 180, 183, and this week's high of 181.22. This area. Looking at the monthly time frame, it is still consolidating with this resistance on this support level 195 and 170. Last month it printed a doji candle. Let's see how it plays out for this month. Looks like a bull flag on the larger time frame, and the 20 EMA also catching up like we see in SPY. Looking at Amazon. Amazon is also on the larger time frame and just consolidating between 256 and 212, this range. We're looking at the daily time frame. So on the daily time frame, after reclaiming the 20 EMA, then aligning the 5, 9 and 20 EMAs to the bullish trend, 5 above 9 and 9 above 20 EMA. It had a wild move this week to test this resistance as well as this trend line resistance. Close right around that, leaving fair value gap between these two candles. Also we have a gap here, and we have inverse fair value gap. This inverse fair value gap may act as a support in the coming sessions. And Amazon also earnings on this month, 23rd April. We may consolidate in between this support and resistance till then. We may go and test this resistance at 258. RSI is slightly above 70. So unless if you print a bearish engulfing candle or evening star candlestick pattern at this resistance level, price may melt up above to test this resistance at 247.48 and 258.59. Looking at the weekly time frame, had a wild move of 13.6% this week, closing this gap entirely, this fair value gap. Then you pull back to test the support level around 225 to 226. That help form a higher low here. Looking at the monthly time frame, that's nice morning star candlestick pattern. So far, we have more than 2 weeks for the month to close, and we have earnings also this month. So on the daily time frame, for now, the price is at the resistance and RSI is above 70. And we have a gap as well as fair value gaps. And the last two trading sessions volume also above average. Unless we form any bearish candlestick pattern setup or bearish chart pattern setup at this level, price may melt up to 248 and 258. Breaking below this support level, we have another gap or this neckline support area around 221 and 215 for this double bottom neckline. Moving on to Apple. Apple also had mitigated this fair value gap and closed upward for past two sessions, but it is still in this resistance level of 262. But it took back-to-back support from 200 SMA for 4 times. On Tuesday, it was almost 4 or 5% down. Then price got pushed back, collecting liquidity below 200 SMA. And for the last 3 sessions, price closed above all these 3 EMAs 5, 9, 20. But the trading volume isn't that great, below the average trading volume of Apple. So price may either form a handle for this cup at this bottom in this support area, or it may go and test this fair value gap and then retest back to test this support to eventually break out this trend line resistance, as well as this resistance is 275 and 280. If we still see a strong rejection from this resistance level, then we'll come and test this support of 245 again, and then 240 followed by this fair value gap. Looking at the weekly time frame, Apple printed a hammer candle with long downside week, closing well above 20 EMA, closed at this resistance level. Unless if you print a bearish engulfing candle, taking out this peak of this hammer, I think it should be good on Apple. And this is also forming this descending triangle pattern setup on the weekly time frame. Looking at the monthly time frame, so on the larger time frame, price is coming out from this resistance but holding up with this support, the previous breakout of this higher high, which is now acting as a support for past 3 months, and the 20 EMA is also catching up. So let's see how it behaves on the daily time frame in the upcoming days. Looking at Dell Technologies, after gapping up on the earnings more than 20%, delivered a strong up move and formed a higher high, taking the liquidity above this all-time high. Looking at the recent price action, after the strong up move, price printed a bearish engulfing candle, which led the price to retrace back to test this support level and this fair value gap on the daily time frame, and took support at 20 EMA to move back and retest this previous swing high. Looking at these three candles, even though it gapped up on Wednesday aligning the overall market, it just printed a doji candle, and the next day it printed a bearish engulfing candle, and RSA ejected at 70% with the bearish RSI divergence setup, and also mitigated this gap. So this will act as a resistance in the coming days. If we see rejections from this resistance, then price will come and test this support of 166.67, followed by 155, 156. We may even form a higher low at this level, 140, 141 level. Looking at the weekly time frame, in the weekly time frame also, price took out the liquidity above this all-time high and printed a gravestone doji candlestick with long upside wick, collecting liquidity above this week's high, and RSI is a little above 70. So on the weekly time frame, we have this inverse fair value gap to act as a support, followed by this support level at 140 or 20 EMA in the weekly time frame. Closing above this gap or the swing high will invalidate this setup. Looking at Core Scientific Incorporation, this stock had a descending triangle pattern breakout earlier this week on Wednesday, aligning with the overall market gap up on that day. We can also notice 20 EMA crossover 200 SMA and closed above this resistance, and now we have this inverse fair value gap as well as this breaker block. So these three candles are doji candles, and the weekly time frame, if you look at, it is a clear bullish candle breaking out of this descending triangle pattern with above average volume. Earlier it took support multiple times from this support level in this demand zone specifically, and last week it printed a hammer candle closing a little below the 20 EMA on weekly time frame. This week it led to this breakout of this descending triangle pattern with the 12% upside. So we may go and break this resistance at 20 and all-time high 23.7. On the weekly time frame, if we look, it is in the uptrend and made a higher high during the last two touches on this uptrend. So on this third touch, it printed a bullish hammer candle last week, and this week it printed a follow-through bullish engulfing candle. breaking this trend line. We have the similar setup on the other Bitcoin mining stocks also, like CIFR. We have this similar descending triangle breakout with a bullish engulfing candle on the weekly time frame, taking support from this previous all-time high. And if you look at daily time frame, took support at 200 SMA, and from this level where it took support multiple times, leaving a fair value gap here and here. So if price retreats back to test the support or inverse fair value gap or 20 EMA, may help form higher low to move back up. The next resistance level is at 19 and 21.75, followed by this high at 25. Breaking below this gap or this fair value gap, 13.67, will lead to test the swing low, followed by support at 11 and 8.79 and 8. So the same setup we can see in the art also. We have this descending triangle pattern breakout closing about 200 SMA. If we pull back, we have support at 15.18, followed by 12. Resistance, overhead resistance at 19.3 and this resistance at 23. Looking at the weekly time frame of RIAT, like CORS and CAFR, it also has a bullish engulfing candle of 29% upside last week. Earlier it had a dragonfly doji candle collecting liquidity below these two support levels, taking support near 200 SMA on weekly time frame. Thank you for watching.